Hello and welcome to week 5 already. Okay, so we did the cycle of change last week. Activity up in the ante a little bit on digging deeper as to what's going on in our heads when we want to deviate from our plans. So fingers crossed you did the activity, even if there wasn't a point where you wanted to deviate or you were struggling. I hope everybody did it, and if you didn't, I would strongly encourage you to do so and just sort of get to grips with you and whether you're still in the informed pessimism stage, and just be prepared for that, because if that hasn't hit as yet, it likely will. Okay, you may not catch it, but it likely will. Now again, we're up in the ante, all right, and this week this is I've called this one silencing the negative voice in your head. So this is just starting to get a little bit deeper into CBT, cognitive behaviour therapy. So let me give you a quick description of what cognitive behaviour therapy is. So I always say cognitive behaviour therapy. If you hear me saying that, apologies. As I say, this is all just me. I am no professional, but so cognitive behavioural therapy, CBT, is a form of psychological treatment that explores the links between thoughts, emotions, and behaviours. Now, another thing about CBT is that it promotes being your own therapist and takes a proactive approach to treatment and relapse prevention. All right. Now, if you remember last week when we talked about the cycle of change, and I was very, I felt it very important to point out the real significance of the relapse stage in the cycle of change. And you can see there that's a really key part of cognitive behavioural therapy. So when I said about, I don't know that a change is ever complete, particularly for an obese person, that's what I was getting at, because I think cognitive behavioural therapy really does acknowledge that this is an ongoing therapy that you can use yourself. All right, so I'm giving you the tools, but you got to do the work. Right, so what is the negative voice in your head? Well, this is the internal dialogue that says horrible, negative and critical things to you. So again, we think back to a couple of weeks ago, it can be from critical parent. So an example might be you walk into a room and see what you perceive to be people who are more successful than you, prettier than you, more handsome than you, more successful than you. And the dialogue that starts in your head, if you're anything like me, is horrendous. I would never tolerate from a stranger or anybody saying the things that I say to myself. So that's actually really worth thinking about, and that's why we need to learn to silence that. Again, this is not going to happen overnight, because this voice has likely been going on for a really, really long time. So the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to give your, we're going to call it your inner critic, okay? So the negative voice in your head, so your inner critic, all right, who says unhelpful things. I want you to create a silly character. I want you to give it a name. We are taking back control here. And if we can visualise what that looks like, then that's part of the process of shutting that voice down. Right. So what we want to aim for is thoughts that are evidence-based, that come from an adult ego state, and we want to tone down negative emotions. All right, so with CBT, we've just said above there, it's the link between thoughts, emotions, and behaviours. All right, so when you think X, Y, or Z, you feel X, Y, or Z emotion, and your behaviour is likely overeating, binging, undereating for some people, but if we look at it around food, it's unhelpful behaviour around food. So the key premise of cognitive behavioural therapy, and I'll say this over and over again, this is not about positive thinking. This is about evidence, and it's about toning feelings down. You can't say to someone who's really sad about something, be happy, okay? If you address the thoughts that have made them feel sad and they feel less sad, that's what we're aiming for. Yes, in an ideal world, we'll get to a situation where we can completely replace negative emotions, but for now, we want to tone them down. So, this is a gentle introduction into those negative thoughts. And in a couple of weeks, we're really going to up the ante and dig a little deeper. All right? So, this week, I want you to try and catch yourself thinking negative thoughts about yourself. Now, you might be aware straight away what sort of things you say to yourself, but actually it might take you to take a moment and really have a think about this, or really listen to what your inner critic is saying to you, because it's maybe just constant dialogue. All right? So, write them down. Write down the negative thoughts. We need to start and understand, again, when they're coming up, what they are. All right? And if you're constantly plagued by worries and doubts, write them down. Okay? Now, you hopefully have heard of this before. I think they say this to people who can't sleep sometimes. You know, if you wake up worrying about something, you know, write it down and you're more likely to get to sleep. So this is, again, it's back to the goals where we wrote those down to make ourselves more successful, to achieve them. There is something to be said for writing these things down. If you can catch what they are, we can start and work on them. And that's what we're going to be doing in a couple of weeks. We're going to start working on these thoughts and how to replace them and how to tone the negative feelings down, which should in turn, in the long term, help us to manage the behaviour. All right? Another activity that you can do is to visualise success. So if you are, if you're saying something very, very negative to yourself, like for example, the little voice in your head's probably telling you that everything is going to go wrong. And I'm actually kind of at this stage at the moment. I have had a 3.5 pound gain in 3 weeks, and I have done aerobics 3 times a week. I have tracked every bite, stayed within my calories, hit my protein goals, hit my water goals, and gained 3.5 pounds. And my inner critic's going, this is it. This is it. It's too good to be true. You're putting the weight on again. This is it. You're going to fail. So when that happens, I'm visualising success. I'm going, okay, I know that's not true. I'm going to get to my goal, and I'm imagining myself have a wedding later this year and have an idea of a dress I'd like to wear. So I imagine myself in that dress. But that's just a quick example for you, okay? So using a visualization of success to silence your inner critic, all right? And again, the visualization of success is fact-based, okay? I'm not imagining myself, in a size 8 bikini with a body to die for, and being realistic about the thing, all right? Hopefully that makes sense, all right? So, really key thing is identifying what is your inner critic saying to you, how often is it, and how big a part is that in you wanting to deviate from plan. Quickfire question. If you don't have time to sit and actually do the activity, again, I think as the weeks go on, it's important to even take the time out to do the activity, even when you don't need it. But the quickfire question this week: is the voice in my head being helpful to me right now? Okay, and if not, what's the best decision for me if I look at the evidence? All right. So that's it for this week. So we're going to start and try to firstly identify what our inner critic is saying, and then we'll work on silencing it as well. Have an amazing week. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.